I would like to take a moment before we get into today's main episode and to talk about my sponsor for the podcast. Podmatch is a new podcasting site dedicated to all podcasters. The platform helps hosts get connected with potential guests to appear on their show, as well as allow guests to find podcasts that will give them a chance to share their story. Podmatch offers many tools to help organize your page, from to-do lists to episode planning to potentially appearing on a leaderboard. Podmatch has it all. The best part, you have the potential to get paid. And who doesn't like to get paid from home? I like to. With an easy sign up, you can start connecting with podcasters and guests immediately. I have been a part of Podmatch since the beginning of May, and I have got to say that it was the best decision I've ever made because Podmatch helps your podcast grow. It helps you get connected with people that have very interesting, very compelling background stories that are just waiting for their story to be shared. So if you are a host or guest and would like to start building professional relationships, explore more opportunities, and have your story shared, I highly suggest that you sign up with Podmatch today by going to joinpodmatch.com/lethal venom to start expanding your network in seconds. I would like to give another huge thank you to Podmatch for sponsoring this episode. Now on to our main episode, and again, you can sign up at joinpodmatch.com/lethal venom to begin your podcasting journey today. Hello everyone, welcome to the Lethal Venom Podcast, the show where I talk about anything I want with the honest to God truth and the lies told. Today I'm joined by Mr. Rich Wright. He is a seasoned artist and designer with over 30 years of experience across multiple industries. Throughout his extensive career, he has faced and overcome significant mental health challenges, including a suicide attempt. His journey to healing has transformed him into a beacon of hope and inspiration for other creatives facing similar struggles. He's here today. He's going to tell me a little bit about his mental health journey as well as some of his many endeavors that he has ventured into. So, Rich, thank you so much for coming on today. I cannot wait to hear your story.
I appreciate you having me, Noah. I really do appreciate you having me on.
So if you could just introduce yourself and feel free to tell my listeners a little bit about you, what you do, and share it
Yeah,
further.
just kind of like you described already, I'm an artist and a designer. Also, host a podcast called the Artist Recovery Podcast, where I'm bringing light to the dark side of art and sharing artists' life stories, creatives' life stories. And we're redefining recovery as renewal, resilience, and creative transformation through that. So a lot of my focus currently has been on that. And I'm also doing some lifestyle coaching for creatives, where I just kind of guide them maybe in a new direction of what they may be considering in terms of a career move or pivot. Um, but that's a little bit of everything in a nutshell.
So the big part of your story that you've faced has been from mental health challenges. Explain and share a little bit more about what your mental health journey has been, and especially what the early signs of some of your struggles that you had.
Yeah, for me, as far back as I can remember, about even 3, 4 years old, I felt depressed. Um, I felt sad a lot. I was highly sensitive, so I was definitely the kid that would cry if someone spoke to me in a loud voice, that kind of a thing. And I had a real perception of a whole lot of stuff around me that others may not have experienced at that young of an age. And it was a bit confusing for me. So I always felt sad, felt depressed. I was anxious if I had to go out into public or go to relatives or anything like that. Um, so that carried on into elementary, um, and then into junior high. Around junior high, uh, I started experiencing a lot of more intense depression and anxiety. And one of the things that I did to alleviate some of that was that I started cutting. And I would take um, thumbtacks and just scrape my arm until they would bleed. And that would, in a sense, translate some of that pain that I was feeling in my heart to an external portion of the body, so that it's a little bit of a alleviation of that pain. Um, Further on into high school, started experiencing it more, started cutting more. Um, Ultimately, my mom walked in on me one day as I was cutting and kind of blew up the whole scenario of that being a secret. So she was really distraught, and then mentioned it to my dad. Both of them were very distraught. Couldn't understand what was happening, couldn't understand why I was doing that. And I didn't really explain to them what was going on. I didn't know how to verbalize that to them at that point in time, but I definitely realized in that moment that I needed to be a little bit more secretive in terms of what I was doing to cope. I don't recommend that for individuals that are coping with mental health issues, whether it's anxiety, depression, any types of dysphorias, that type of thing. Um, I encourage individuals to try and find somebody that they can speak to, at least to share some of that, so that it's out of them, so to speak. A lot of times, verbalizing it will alleviate the pain just as much as what I was trying to do to alleviate it, and with my cutting. Um, and around that time, too, uh, about 15, my dad, who was a mechanic, ended up having a collapsed lung. And so he ended up going to the hospital after most of the day of being in pain, thinking he just pulled a muscle. And so ended up going to the hospital, and they told him that if he would have waited about 20 more minutes before getting to the hospital, he would have probably died. Once they got him there, they realized that he had blibs on his lungs, which had developed because as a mechanic, he was a burn on brake dust and asbestos and stuff like that, um, with doing mechanic work. And so he developed these blibs, and one of those had busted and just created a hole in the lung. So it had collapsed. They ended up having to do surgery on him. So it cracked his ribs, opened him up. Took about 3 inches off the top of his lungs. And then he was out of work for roughly 9 months at that point in time. So I would say we were probably lower lower class income family at that point in time, just under middle class, but definitely lower class. Um, so there wasn't a whole lot of money coming in because he was kind of the only breadwinner of the family. So at that point, it was like I felt this pressure. I needed to go to work. So I went out and I was applying for some jobs. Found a job where they were going to hire me on the spot just based off of the interview. And then they took another look at my birth date, and I was still only 15. So here in Michigan, where we currently live, the legal age of employment here is 16. So they told me I had to wait for about 3 months before they could hire me. So I was a little bit down about that. Fast forward, turned 16, went in the exact same day, applied again, got hired. So then I was able to start making some money to help out the family. Because around that time as well, my dad was getting ready to go back to work, and had been off for that 9 months. But with that, moving back into work, um, he worked probably about a week, and the other lung collapsed on the other side. And it was the exact same situation. Went into the hospital. They had to open him up, crack his ribs, take about 3 inches off of that lung as well. And then eventually told him that he couldn't go back into doing mechanic work. And so he was trying to figure out, all right, what am I going to do? How can I transition into something else? ultimately, he ended up going to work for Napa, which they delivered auto parts to him all the time. So he pretty much knew what the job was and consisted of, with all of the parts, knew all the parts numbers, all that stuff, even before he got hired. So it was an easy transition for him. And then he ended up spending the next 30 years with Napa. But at that time, too, I was moving up in the business that I was working at, which was a fast food restaurant, kind of like Jimmy John's or Quiznos. It was called. So I moved up in the ranks there. Towards the end of high school, I thought that I would go off to college and study graphic design because I'd been hearing, that there was a potential that I could go into the corporate offices and work in their advertising department. So I thought, me being an artist and being creative, because I was drawing as soon as I could hold a crayon, basically, and then just developed from there in terms of my creative abilities. I say I was given the gift of creativity because it's just always been easy for me. I haven't had a whole lot of education around that. Um, Picked a college in Florida, in Pensacola, Florida, that I went off to, and was there for four full semesters. Played some sports while I was there, soccer, basketball. And at that point, I started sensing the depression coming back and coming back a lot stronger at that point in time, which now we know in the late teens, early 20s, that's where it starts to really develop into individuals that struggle with mental health problems. And after 4 semesters, I came back home. I was really struggling from that perspective. And so decided I was going to take a semester off. So I just stayed home, worked as much as I could, and went back for a final semester trying to um, complete my graphic design degree, but I wasn't able to finish. There was just too much stress on me. My grades weren't great. I was doing good in my art classes with A's and B's, but everything else I was failing. And so even that fifth semester that I went back, I was having to um, take classes over again that I had already spent money on. And I was paying for everything myself. My parents weren't able to help a whole lot. They did a little, but not in terms of the full tuition payments and stuff like that. So at the end of that semester, I decided I just was going to stop doing that and come back home. Um, One of the things that really inspired me while I was down in Florida, though, because of course we were close to the beach in Pensacola there, uh, the Panama City and Panhandle area of Florida, Georgia, Alabama, um, was the surf shops. I was always going into the surf shops and looking at the surfboards, the designs on the boards, the clothing, the designs on the clothing, all that type of stuff. And that really was the thing that kind of spurred uh, the desire for me to want to be interested in fashion. Um, I was always, going to the malls and stuff like that, and looking at cool clothes and buying cool clothes, and then my friends would be like, "Oh, we want those kind of clothes that you got on," and take us shopping. So I'd take them shopping to the place where I was getting my clothes, helping them buy that stuff. So when I came back from college, I thought I'll just go ahead and start my own fashion company and start designing some clothes. So I did that, still working at the uh, restaurant part time. Um, and at that time as well, a buddy of mine worked at one of the local music venues here in Metro Detroit. And he knew that I was developing this clothing line. And he said, "Hey, we've got this Lollapalooza tour that's coming through Detroit, and they're going to be at my venue. If you want to, I can get you set up with a table and a booth, and you can sell your clothes and stuff there for the Lollapalooza." So I was like, all right, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to have to buy a bunch of product, get enough product made to be able to set up for that day. Because at that point in time, it was only a 1 day event. And so I found an investor who invested 12,000 for me to finish producing what I was making in terms of product. And at that point in time, we're producing T-shirts, um, but we were cut and sewing our T-shirts because they had a specific cut to them, which was a little bit baggier, a little bit fuller in the sleeve and the body. So it wasn't like I was just buying them from a wholesaler. We were actually making the T-shirt and then putting designs on it, embroidery, screen printed. I had hats made up, embroidery, different stuff like that. So I had this nice little collection of stuff that I was able to go ahead and set up. Once I got set up, the tour representatives came around to my booth and they said, "Hey, we're gonna have to shut you down for the day." And I'm like, "What do you mean, shut me down? The gates haven't even opened yet." And they're like, "Yeah, we're gonna have to shut you down though because we have another vendor who's selling T-shirts and stuff also, and we already have an arrangement with him that we wouldn't have any additional vendors that are selling T-shirts other than what we're selling as the tour merch." Um, and he was another local designer that was in this area. So I'm like, "Well, can you get a hold of my buddy who at that point in time he was the event coordinator, so he was handling everything on the facility side of stuff, working with them in collaboration, making sure everything they needed was taken care of." So he comes over to the booth. They're talking to him. They're trying to convey to him that they got to shut me down. He's arguing like, no, he has nothing to do with the tour. He's the venue's guest, and we asked him to set up uh, and be, one of our local artists. So ultimately, it ended up that he got overruled just because Lollapalooza is a large tour. It's a big moneymaker, so there wasn't a whole lot he could do in terms of trying to defend me and keep me available to set up. They ended up giving me all access pass for the day. Said, stay as long as you want, watch the shows, come backstage, whatever. Um, and ended up doing that, but it was like a gut punch at that point in time because it's like, all right, I've just spent my investors' full investment to produce this product, and I'm not going to be able to make any sales today. And at that point in time, I didn't have the forethought to have a plan B to do that. And so it was crushing, literally, from a perspective as a creative, also to trying to think in my head all day, all right, what am I going to tell my investor? How's this going to work out? Ultimately, ended up telling him that we weren't able to sell anything that day. We had to close down. And he got nervous about the whole situation and asked for his money back. And I said, well, we've got an agreement, number one. And also, two, you see there's all kinds of product here. We've burnt through the investment. So I don't have any money that I can give you back right now. He's like, well, I want my money back. I'm like, all right. So in my head, that was just added pressure on top of what I was dealing with from a mental health standpoint, the depression, the anxiety, the stress of putting all that together to set up at that event. I was also feeling some stress at work at that point in time because I come back from school and the opportunities that I thought I was going to have to go into the corporate office to do advertising design was not going to end up happening for me. So I was feeling all of these different angles of things that were taking place where I was just running into dead ends and it wasn't working out. Things weren't happening for me. And so it went on like that for about another week and a half, 2 weeks of where I was just in my head trying to figure things out, trying to think of different ways to do and all I could see was just a dead end, not any way for me to go further. And at that point, I had started just seeing a therapist for the first time. Uh, and it wasn't really something that was helping at that point in time because I had only been seeing him for a couple weeks. And he thought that I needed to be seen by a psychiatrist because he was just a regular therapist, cognitive therapist. So he'd referred me out to a psychiatrist to look at things and see if I might need medications to help stabilize me, that kind of stuff. But again, I was just felt like I was running into dead ends. Um, and so I decided I was just going to end things. I was going to take my life and then just exit this world. So I left work early that day because I just couldn't handle being there. I couldn't focus, couldn't keep my emotions under control. Went back home. Just happened to be my parents weren't there at that point in time, so I felt comfortable in my resolve and resolution to do this. So I went ahead and I had cut my wrist on my left arm and then was getting ready to cut my wrist on the right arm, and my parents walked through the door. So once again, they come in right as I'm doing these things, um, ask me what's going on. They're distressed, obviously for good reason, um, trying to console me. And at that point, I'm just crying. I can't get any calm to come over me. I can't answer them in terms of the questions they were answering. So they called up my psychiatrist and said, "Hey, this is a situation. He's cut himself and trying to kill himself. So what do we do?" And fortunately, at that time, the psychiatrist that I was seeing, she was also a resident at one of the local hospitals. So not only did she have her own private practice, but she was also a resident. So she would spend part of her day seeing patients outside of the hospital and then part of her day seeing patients that were in the hospital. So it was very easy for her to be able to say, "Hey, take him to the emergency room. Let's get him admitted. Let's get him stabilized, and then we'll start looking at what to do to move forward from there." And so, whenever something like this takes place, you have to sign paperwork, which is for a 72-hour hold, meaning you're going to be in the hospital for 72 hours. And beyond that will just be determined by you and your doctor involved. And I thought to myself, all right, well, I'll go in here, take the weekend, and I'll just at least be able to get away from everything at that point in time. And so once that 72 hours was up, I asked my doctor, I'm like, "Okay, so when do I get checked out?" And she was like, "You're not getting checked out." And I'm like, What are you talking about?" She's like, "Yeah, I don't feel that you're ready to go back home, and I want to try some medications with you to see if we can't get you a little bit more stabilized." So ultimately, ended up being in there for 6 weeks. Was able to get some medications in my system after trying just about everything that was available at that point in time. Got a couple meds that were working for me and got me stabilized. Then I was released into what they call outpatient a program, which meant that I would have to I could go home, but I had to go back to the hospital at least 3 times a week. I had to go Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for a day program, which meant all day long we were talking to group therapists, doing art projects, different things like that, trying to get some more of those emotions and stuff to come out, and also to learn some coping mechanisms, stuff like that. And so that's how that happened, and that's how that came about. Where decided to make that decision.
Well, that's such a huge, impactful story. So when you were in this place for 6 weeks, you won't. I've heard people that say when they go off to these treatment centers and they get put into these rehabilitation centers that they see and hear some awful things. How is this about how people usually you hear people screaming and all this stuff? What was it like living in there for 6 weeks? What were some of the things that you were allowed to have with you during that time?
Well, you couldn't have anything that could potentially be harmful for you. So I couldn't have a belt, couldn't have shoestrings, couldn't have any kind of devices that had sharp edges and stuff like that. Um, and in terms of the environment, the way that it was and the way that it was set up, they did have individual rooms, which for me, the first week or two, I was able to have my own room to myself that I could kind of retreat to at different points in time during the day. But it was on an entire floor. So I wasn't in there with just people who um, had attempted suicide or anything like that. I was in there with everybody who had a mental health issue. So people who were schizophrenic, people who had um, other disorders in terms of mental deficiencies, people who had tripped on acid that were still in a psychotic state, um, walking around, pacing, uh, yelling. Wasn't a whole lot of screaming that was taking place, but there was yelling that would go on, and people would just start yelling at the television or yelling at the walls, just different things. It was at that point in time, it was the traditional kind of scary story that you hear about a psych ward. Um, it's a lot better nowadays. Some places are still that way, but I think a lot of the system has been updated to the point where it's a little bit more structured in terms of who's where and what the decisions are to put people in certain places. Um, but also, too, and here's another thing about when you're in that state of mind, you're not thinking completely coherently. So even after getting in there and getting some reprieve from the outside world, I was still thinking I wanted to die. Now, we couldn't have anything that had any possibility of allowing us to harm ourselves. But they did give us food 3 times a day. And when they give you food, they give you a spork, which is that spoon fork thing that you get. And you get a knife, which is a plastic knife. Both of them are plastic. But in my head, too, I was looking at it from a creative standpoint, and I'm like, all right, well, this is one way that they've messed up because I can take this spoon, put it in my pocket, and then go back into my room, and I can, you know, kind of break it into, make myself a sharp edge, and then just kind of file that down so it'll be a little bit sharper. And I ended up cutting myself some more while I was in there, which I weren't very happy about that, and then kind of monitored me a little bit stronger in terms of what they were allowing me to have access to. So that's kind of what the environment was like.
What are the rooms set up like? Is it more like a padded room? Is it kind of like you had walls, or is it kind of how prisons are, where they have kind of like bars on the along the walls or up at the front of the essentially where the door would be?
Yeah, no, they didn't have bars or anything like that. They do have the glass that has the wire running through it. A lot of you see this a lot at schools where they have the glass that has the wiring crisscrossed through it. They do have that on the walls and the doors um, to the floor. The main rooms on the floor was just like a regular hospital floor. So you would just have that wooden door that you could open and close. Um, and then you would have if you're thinking about a hospital floor, what that might look like, where you would have a nurse's station, there would just
Mhm.
be an extended portion of that to where they'd have tables and chairs set up, and a TV over on the side where you could watch TV and sit on couches or different chairs. So it was kind of an open floor plan, but also too, most of the rooms were set up just like a regular hospital room. Um, some did have padding on them, depending on, what the capacity was of the patient in terms
Mhm.
of, you know, what their deficiencies were and how potentially harmful they were to themselves. If they were, pounding their head on the walls and stuff, they would get put into one of those rooms where there was padding. It wasn't like the padding that you see on TV. It's more or less like the padding that you would have uh, at your school gym. It's on the walls behind the basketball. Um, those thick blue pads that are kind of velcroed to the wall, kind of like
Mm.
that.
Okay.
Um, so it's not like the TV so much scenario. It's
Mm.
just more like the that I would say the gym classroom padding that's on the walls that you end up running into, after you made a play or something.
Yeah, because on TV they always show like the whole room's made out of padding, the walls, the ceilings, the floor that you're walking on. I mean, anything.
A lot of that, a lot of that imagery is from probably, I would say, 1920s, 1930s, 40s era of psychiatric asylums and hospitals. And at that point in time in history, too, they had just a hospital that was dedicated to that. Where I was at, it was literally in the hospital, it was just a dedicated floor. So what Hollywood has done is they've taken that, imagery from that era and time and just brought it up and made it seem like that's how it is today. But it's not like that.
So depending on it, kind of I've not interviewed really a lot of people that have been from a psych ward, and I've seen interviews, but one thing I don't understand is I wonder why they would put section off for like certain people. Like this is kind of like the suicidal floor. This is the psychiatric or like the schizophrenic floor. They kind of get it because if you have someone that's schizophrenic and someone that's suicidal together, I
Yeah,
can just see that being like a disaster waiting to happen because
yeah.
it's like when you were there, were there any instances that maybe you're allowed to share of like stuff that has gone wrong where it was like either a patient went too crazy to where they really did stuff that where that whole place had to be on lockdown?
Not to the point of, well, I'll say it like this: the floor was already locked down, so there was one
Mm.
entryway into the floor, one entryway out of the floor. So it was just like if you get off the hospital elevator onto a particular floor, then you go in whatever direction you need to go to a room or go to the nurse's desk. The way it was set up there is you get off the elevator on that floor and then you walk down a hall and then there's two doors that would open up kind of like a that uh, what is it? It's like a butterfly doors. So they open up
Mm.
together or one opens up over the other.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so once you got through those doors, they would shut behind you and they would lock. So the only way you could get out once you're in is you had to be buzzed out from the nurse's desk. So it's set
Mm.
up like that.
Okay.
Same way with coming onto the floor. You had to be buzzed in for them
Mm.
to get on the floor. So it was set up like that in terms of security scenarios. The other scenario that you're asking about in terms of was there any situations where um, two people that have two different scenarios going on with their mental health, that might be a disaster. And at that point in time, it was set up like that So there was a couple instances where when I was uh, in there for that period of time, where you would have people that would be, you know, maybe on a new medication and it wasn't working for them. So it would make them highly agitated. And, you know, you get somebody that's just highly agitated, just like you see anywhere in everyday life, and something sets them off and they just start getting loud. They start screaming. They get abrasive to the nurses. Nurses try to calm them down, male and female nurses, trying to calm them down. It's not working. And then ultimately, you know, they take them, they have to go put them in their room. And when they do that, they don't take them back a lot of times to the room that they're normally in. Because a lot of the rooms, if you just, like for me, my room didn't have a lock on the door. So there's no way that I could shut the door and lock it so nobody could get in. So one of the things that they would do is they would put them in a room that had the ability to keep it closed, make sure that they weren't able to have anything in there that could harm themselves. So it was just a different room within that floor that they would take them to just to get them to calm down, get them to get composure back, different things like that. But that's pretty much all that I saw in terms of an extreme situation, and that happened quite often, where somebody would just start getting loud and screaming, yelling. It wasn't like a constant screaming; it was just yelling at the top of their lungs, voice, argument type scenario. Um, and you would think, yes, that's potentially, possibly where you're going to have a scenario that's going to be a disaster, but they had enough nurses that were cognitive enough to pay attention to what was going on and who was there. So they kind of knew potentially what could happen, what was uh, safe things that they could just let go. They could, you know, wait it out. If somebody started getting loud with somebody else just for no reason, they would say something. They would call out their name and be like, "Hey, you need to quiet down." Um, and if they didn't, then they would, you know, do something about it. But a lot of times they just tried to diffuse the situation, and tried to be as empathetic as possible with the patient to just get them to realize, hey, you're in a safe place to begin with. We want you to stay that way. So we just need you to calm down, get some composure, and we'll let you stay here out in with everybody else. If you don't, then we're going to have to take you to a different room. So those did happen, but it wasn't anything that got really out of control or really hazardous.
It sounds like the place was ran by very professional personnel
Yes.
because from when you hear horror stories from past mental health people that have been in psych wards, they always have said the staff treated us like shit, is a
Yeah.
better way of putting it. Is
Yeah.
that we were mistreated, they did not do it well. It sounds like in this situation, you were at a very good place. They had really good personnel there and had good doctors there that could help calm down situations. And I think that's a lot, and that's probably uncommon in these
Yeah.
psych wards a little bit, is because of how volatile that they are. The personnel could get really thin. Over the years, a lot of psych wards have closed and they've shut
Yeah.
down a lot of them over the years. For someone that's been in this situation and you were only there for 6 weeks, some people are there for years and,
Yeah.
some people might stay there for for a few days. Do you see not having these mental health institutions be a problem for this generation now, or do you think as someone that's dealt with it for the 6 weeks, something that it's not a fit for anyone? What's your opinion on the lack of mental health institutions?
I think it's a detriment for sure. Um, I think at this point in time, we need more mental health services available to individuals. Um, it, a lot of it's had to do with just budget cuts over the years with facilities, hospitals. There are facilities that are still open that are definitely, play into those horror stories. That you got uh, staff that's not empathetic to the patient, they're not compassionate to the patient. It's almost as if they're going against all of the years of study that they're taking to become a nurse, even to be able to work in that environment. They've just thrown out all of the aspects of the patient care component to that. So there are places that are still like that that don't have good reputations. You're absolutely correct. I was fortunate enough to be in a facility in a hospital that was one of the better ones in the area. And like I mentioned, my doctor was a resident there. So it was a lot easier for her to navigate my care because she was a resident, meaning she was on staff at the hospital as well as having her own private practice outside of the hospital. So she could literally just walk out to the nurse's desk and say, "This is what I want done. This, and this." And if it wasn't done, she would be back the next day or call later in the day to make sure it was done to find out. If it wasn't done, then she would be able to say something about it. And then, those nurses have the potential to lose their jobs. So that was a bonus point for me in terms of that aspect. And two, like you mentioned, it was a really good facility. The staff really cared. It's not the case everywhere, so it's definitely something it's a detriment at this point in time and day in society because a lot of them have closed. A lot of the full care facilities have closed completely. Those that have housed individuals for years at a time that have uh, illnesses that can't be taken care of by their family or any other caregivers, and they need to be in a facility. Um, and I think that's part of some of the homeless problem that we deal with nowadays. Is that some of those patients who probably could have a much better life if they were able to be in a facility um, and get a meal at a regular time every day, have the potential to get some medications if they need it, um, to get them to a place of stabilization in terms of their um, mental state uh, and their chemical imbalances and different things like that, get it leveled off. I think if we had that nowadays, might solve some of the homeless problem. It might also solve a lot of the other problems out there where people feel like they have no place to turn whatsoever. And that's kind of what I've been trying to do with my platform and with my career as an artist and creative. It's just since coming out of that experience, is just try to raise the volume on awareness that there are problems here. We need to address these things, and we need to look at mental health and health care for individuals with mental health issues. We need to look at that more seriously and try to hit it head on and address it urgently rather than passively.
I agree with everything you're saying. I think that there needs to be more psych wards, which I want, if we have more, I want them to be staffed professionally
Yeah,
like yours was. Because um, it's sad that you have to say that it's rare to
for sure.
find
Yeah,
a good institution like that. Because, and it doesn't even have to be like the staff is bad. It could just be from poor living conditions. It could be from poorly manufactured buildings. Because,
yeah,
some of these mental institutions, before they probably, I swear, I keep having hiccups.
yeah,
Before they get closed down, they probably have lived or been there for 50, 60 plus years. I mean, it's like long, long, long time since these buildings have been built. So of course the building's gonna start caving in, it's gonna start falling down. I mean,
yeah,
you see on YouTube all the time these ghost hunters always are
yeah,
touring and breaking into mental institutions that have been shut down and closed, and it's been abandoned. It's these haunted buildings. So
Yeah.
they're out there. After you had got out of, after the 6 weeks, um, did you find in your creative design journey kind of painting was a way to kind of cope with the past, dealing with their suicidal ideation, the suicide attempts that you made? Did painting actually kind of help put some ease in yourself about those situations and kind of bring light to it?
For me personally, it didn't. And the reason that I say that is because I already I already naturally have that ability, and I never looked at it as a therapeutic process for myself. I looked at it from the perspective of this is easy for me to do. I can do it. I don't have to be guided a whole lot with doing it. But also, too, the thing that I do know about arts and creativity, music, everything like that, I do know that it is helpful for individuals. And that's one of the things that I'm doing too with some of the coaching that I'm doing is if somebody's having an issue and they've never painted before, or they've never expressed themselves through any kind of creative modality, I try to encourage that, even to the point where it doesn't have to you don't have to go out and spend a couple $100 on paint supplies. You can go to the Dollar General or the dollar store, just buy that basic watercolor set and buy a pad of paper. Real simple, pretty cheap and inexpensive. And then just start playing with the color, because what takes place is there's a connection between the brain and the function of the hand and the movement of the hand that is beneficial into stimulating neurotransmitters and stuff like that to allow for some of that to calm down, like you're trying to ask in the question. That is possible. For me, it wasn't something that helped me. It was just another outlet for me to be creative. And my mind was already going full on with creativity at that point in time. My mind was trying to figure out what am I going to do to get back into society, because now I've been out of society essentially for 8 weeks, realistic, or 12 weeks essentially, not having to go to work, only having to go to the hospital, being in the hospital for 6 of those weeks. Um, so I was just trying to figure out, all right, what am I going to do when I get out of here and have to, deal with this on my own. But, like I'm saying, music therapy, art therapy, painting, just even journaling, the process of journaling, writing, taking a pen or a pencil and writing thoughts out on paper. That in and of itself is cathartic, and it's a way to be able to get some things out of your system, out of your mind, and it's a little bit of a release. For me, I was stuck in that mindset that I needed to cut in order to get that release. Writing, doing paints, playing music, different things like that. That's a different way of being able to release, that is a little bit safer, a little bit kinder to you as an individual, kinder to yourself, empathetic to yourself, which I think a lot of times we don't focus on that or don't have that in the front of our heads, that we need to be kind to ourselves. Right? One of the things that I end my podcast episodes with is always listen to your heart, but be kind to your mind. And the reason that I say that is because I've got to that place of understanding, of knowing that my mind for so many years has just tried to protect me. So it's built up these thought processes where it tries to keep me out of dangerous scenarios, which when I say dangerous, I don't mean like physically dangerous. I mean things that are going to affect my soul, my spirit, um, my ability to stay calm, different things like that. Um, and if we're able to realize that then we can start being kinder to the mind and start understanding, okay, my mind is telling me I need to do this or this to get out of this situation, but it's just trying to protect me. I don't have to cope like that. I don't have to cope in that way. I can do it something over here in this way to alleviate some of that.
I'm happy that you did bring up a good point earlier about when I asked you, has it been a coping mechanism? And you said no. I do appreciate you said that because I think everyone says, well, if you love doing something, just do that for therapeutic. You made a really good point. It's not effective for everyone. It
Correct.
doesn't work. Now, I'm not saying to not try it. I'm
Yeah.
not saying that you don't have to maybe give it a go or give it a try. I'm just saying that if you tell someone that says, "Oh yeah, I paint and I draw all the time and it's been so therapeutic for me, you should try it." You can try it, but if it doesn't work for you, don't force yourself to try
Right.
to get to like it. So I
Yeah.
do appreciate you do for making that point of actually being kind of the one of the first ones I've had on the show say, I tried this, it doesn't work for me. I just do it because I like to do it.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you for making that point because I think a lot of people don't. They hear every person that you hear has a story that's like, oh yeah, I do it and it's so therapeutic for me. You never hear that, no, it doesn't work for everyone. So I do appreciate you saying that.
Yeah.
Um, we barely kind of scratched the surface of your career.
Yeah.
You've had so much in your life. I mean, you've done, and you briefly talked about it when you were doing your mental health stuff about your fashion
Yeah.
journey. You've also been like an artist and designer. I'd honestly would like to have you back on to have like do kind of a part two of, I guess,
Sure.
having like life after being in the mental health institution for that. We could do life after that. But
Yeah.
for right now, for people that may have questions or they would like to support you and like follow your journey, where can they all find you at?
Easiest place to go is to my website. You can go to richwrightunlimited.com or theartistrecovery.com. Both of those are at the same place. It's the same website. Just have the domains pointed in the same location. That's the easiest place. All the social media links are there. Um, my podcast links are there too, so you can even watch some of the videos, the conversations I'm having with artists and different things like that. So that's the easiest, and I'd love to come back. No, it's been a pleasure.
And as I always do, I will put all of his links in the description box. I will put his website, all of the social media platforms down there, as well as his podcast. So it's all easy access for you all to find. It's all there just at the tap of your finger. Is will be all down there for easy access. So I always make it easy. You can also follow me on the social media as well. Instagram and TikTok, it is Lethal Venom Podcast on there. Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, it's Noah's Podcast. So feel free to follow them if you would like to. And then, as always, listen to Lethal Venom wherever you get your podcast from. It's on Spotify, Apple, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, YouTube, Pandora. It's where all the podcasts are available. So feel free to subscribe so you'll get notified of when new episodes come out. Thank you again to Rich for being on the show today, telling your story, and I hope that someone out there listens to it and feels felt inspired from it. Thank you to all my listeners for tuning in today. I hope everyone has a great rest of your day and week. Be safe out there, make good decisions, and I'll see you all in the next episode of Lethal Venom.